Listening. This month's readings will be from a memoir from Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Maya Angelou was a poet, activist, and teacher. She was really best known for her unique and pioneering autobiographical writing style. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is an autobiography of her early life when she was growing up during the 30s and 40s when African Americans and whites attended separate schools. She experienced racial and gender discrimination, but with the help of a family friend, she learned to rise above it. Today's Just Listen is a memoir taken from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. As you listen to this memoir, you will meet Mrs. Flowers, who played an integral part in Maya's life. As you just listen, you may recall a memory of a special person or event in your life. Write it down, share it with the family and friends. These little vignettes of your life make up the combination of the people that we are today. All right, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, a memoir by Maya Angelou. We lived with our grandmother and uncle in the rear of the store. It was always spoken of with a capital S, but which she had owned for 25 years. Early in the century, Mama, we soon stopped calling her grandmother, sold lunches to the sawmen in the lumber yard in East Stamps, and to the seedmen in the cotton gill in West Stamps. Her crisp meat pies and cool lemonade, when joined with her miraculous ability to be in two places at the same time, assured her business success. From being a mobile lunch counter, she set up a stand between the 2 points of best fiscal interest and supplied the workers' needs for many years. Then she had the store built in the heart of the Negro area. Over the years, it became a lay center of activities in town. On Saturdays, barbers set up their customers in the shade of the porch, and troubadours on their ceaseless crawlings through the South leaned across its benches and sang their sad songs. The formal name of the store was the William Johnson General Merchandise Store. Customers could find food staples, a good variety of colored thread, mash for hogs, corn for chickens, coal oil for lamps, light bulbs for the wealthy, shoestrings, hair dressings, balloons, and flower seeds. Anything not visible had only to be ordered. Until we became familiar enough to belong to the store and it to us, we were locked up in a funhouse of things where the attendant had gone home for life. Weighing the half-pounds of flour, excluding the scoop, and depositing them dust-free into the thin paper sacks held a simple kind of adventure for me. I developed an eye for measuring how full a silver-looking ladle of flour, mash, meal, sugar, or corn had to be to push the scale indicator over to 8 ounces or 1 pound. When I was absolutely accurate, our appreciative customers used to admire, "Sister Henderson sure got some smart grandchildrens." If I was off in the store's favor, the eagle-eyed women would say, "Put some more in that sack, child. Don't you try to make a profit off of me." Then I would quietly but persistently punish myself for every bad judgment. The fine was no silver-wrapped kisses, the sweet chocolate drops that I loved more than anything in the world except Bailey, and maybe even canned pineapples. My obsession with pineapples nearly drove me mad. I dreamt of the days when I would be grown and able to buy a whole carton for myself alone. Although the syrupy golden rings sat in their exotic cans on the shelves all year, we tasted them during Christmas. Mama used the juice to make almost black fruit cakes. Then she lined heavy, soot-crusted iron skillets with the pineapple rings for rich upside-down cakes. Bailey and I each received one slice, and I carried mine around for hours, shredding off the fruit until there was nothing left except the perfume on my fingers. I'd like to think that my desire for pineapples was so sacred that I wouldn't allow myself to steal a can, which was possible, and eat it all alone in the garden. But I'm certain that I must have weighed the possibility of the scent exposing me and didn't have the nerve to attempt it. Until I was 13 and left Arkansas for good, the store was my favorite place to be. Alone and empty in the mornings, it looked like an unopened present from a stranger, opening the front doors and pulling the ribbon off of an unexpected gift. The light would come in softly. We faced north, easing itself over the shelves of mackerel, salmon, tobacco, and thread. It fell flat on the big vat of lard, and by noontime during the summer, the grease had softened to a thick soup. Whenever I walked into the store in the afternoon, I sensed that it was tired. I alone could hear the slow pulse of its job half done. But just before bedtime, after numerous people had walked in and out, had argued over their bills, and joked about their neighbors, or just dropped in to give Sister Henderson the hi, y'all, the promise of magic mornings returned to the store and spread itself over the family in washed life waves. When Maya was about 10 years old, she returned to stamps from a visit to St. Louis with her mother. She had become depressed and withdrawn. For nearly a year, I sopped around the house, the store, the school, and church like an old biscuit, dirty and inedible. Then I met, or rather got to know, the lady who threw me my first lifeline, Mrs. Bertha Flowers. Mrs. Bertha Flowers was the aristocrat of black stamps. She had the grace of control to appear warm in the coldest weather, and on the Arkansas summer days, it seemed like she had a private breeze which swirled around, cooling her. She was thin, without the taunt look of wiry people, and her printed voile dresses and flowered hats were as right for her as denim overalls for a farmer. She was our side's answer to the richest white woman in town. Her skin was a rich black that would have peeled like a plum if snagged, but then no one would have had thought of getting close enough to Mrs. Flowers to ruffle her dress, let alone snag her skin. She didn't encourage familiarity. She wore gloves, too. I don't think I ever saw Mrs. Flowers laugh, but she smiled often, a slow widening of her thin black lips to show even small white teeth, then the slow effortlessness closing. When she chose to smile on me, I always wanted to thank her. The action was so grateful and inclusively benign. She was one of the few gentlewomen I have ever known, and has remained throughout my life the measure of what a human being should be. One afternoon, sweet milk fresh in my memory, she stopped at the store to buy provisions. Another Negro woman of her health and age would have been expected to carry the paper sacks home in her hand. But Mama said, "Sister Flowers, I'll send Bailey up to your house with these things." She smiled, that slow, dragging smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'd prefer Marguerite, though." My name was beautiful when she said it. I'd been meaning to talk to her anyway. They gave each other age group looks. Mama said, "Well, that's all right then. Sister, go and change your dress. You're going to Sister Flowers." There was a little path beside the rocky road, and Mrs. Flowers walked in front, swinging her arms and picking her way over the stones. She said without turning her head to me, "I hear you're doing very good schoolwork, Marguerite, but that it's all written. The teachers report that they have trouble getting you to talk in class." We passed the triangular farm on our left, and the path widened to allow us to walk together. I hung back in a separate unasked and unanswerable questions. Come and walk along with me, Marguerite. I couldn't have refused even if I wanted to. She pronounced my name so nicely, or more correctly, she spoke each word with such clarity that I was certain a foreigner who didn't understand English could have understood her. Now, no one is going to make you talk. Possibly no one can. But bear in mind, language is a man's way of communicating with his fellow man, and it is language alone which separates him from the lower animals. That was a totally new idea to me, and I would need time to think about it. Your grandmother says you read a lot. Every chance you get, that's good, but not good enough. Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with the shades of deeper meaning. I memorized the part about the human voice infusing words. It seemed so valid and poetic. She said she was going to give me some books and that I not only must read them, I must read them aloud. She suggested that I try to make a sentence sound in as many different ways as possible. I'll accept no excuse if you return a book to me that has been badly handled. My imagination boggled at the punishment I would deserve if, in fact, I did abuse a book of Mrs. Flowers. Death would be too kind and brief. The odors of the house surprised me. Somehow, I never connected Mrs. Flowers with food or eating or any other common experience of common people. There must have been an outhouse too, but my mind never recorded it. A sweet scent of vanilla had met us as she opened the door. I made tea cookies this morning. You see, I had planned to invite you for cookies and lemonade so we could have this little chat. The lemonade is in the icebox. It followed that Mrs. Flowers would have ice on an ordinary day, when most families in our town bought ice late on Saturdays, only a few times during the summer, to be used in the wooden ice cream freezers. She took the bags from me and disappeared through the kitchen door. I looked around the room that I had never in my wildest fantasies imagined I would see. Brown photographs leered or threatened from the walls, and the white, freshly done curtains pushed against themselves and against the wind. I wanted to gobble up the room entire and take it to Bailey, who would help me analyze and enjoy it. Have a seat, Marguerite. Over there by the table, she carried a platter covered with a tea towel. Although she warned me that she hadn't tried her hand at baking sweets for some time, I was certain that, like everything else about her, the cookies would be perfect. They were flat, round wafers, slightly browned at the edges and butter yellow in the center. With the cold lemonade, they were sufficient for a childhood's lifelong diet. Remembering my manners, I took nice little ladylike bites off the edges. She said she had made them expressly for me, and that she had a few in the kitchen that I could take home to my brother. So I jammed one whole cake in my mouth, and the rough crumbs scratched the insides of my jaws, and if I hadn't had to swallow, it would have been a dream come true. As I ate, she began the first of what we called my lessons in living. She said I must always be intolerant of ignorance, but understanding of illiteracy. That some people unable to go to school were more educated and even more intelligent than college professors. She encouraged me to listen carefully to a country people called Mother Wit, that in those homely sayings were crouched the collective wisdom of generations. When I finished the cookies, she brushed off the table and brought a thick, small book from the bookcase. I had read A Tale of Two Cities and found it up to my standards as a romantic novel. She opened the first page, and I heard poetry for the first time in my life. It was the best of times and the worst of times. Her voice slid in and curved down through and over the words. She was nearly singing. I wanted to look at the pages. Were they the same that I had read? Or were there notes, music lined on the pages as in a hymn book? Her sounds began cascading gently, and I knew from listening to 1,000 preachers that she was nearing the end of her reading, and I hadn't really heard a word, heard to understand, not a single word. How do you like that? It occurred to me she expected a response. The sweet vanilla was still on my tongue, and her reading was a wonder in my ears. I had to speak. I said, "Yes, ma'am." It was the least I could do, but it was also the most. There's one more thing. Take this book of poems and memorize one for me. Next time you pay me a visit, I want you to recite. I have tried often to search beyond the sophistication of years for the enchantment I so easily found in these gifts. The essence escapes, but some aura remains. To be allowed, no, invited into the private lives of strangers, and to share their joys and fears was a chance to exchange the southern bitter wormwood for a cup of mead with Beowulf, or a hot cup of tea and milk with Oliver Twist. When I said aloud, it is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done, the tears of love filled my eyes at my selflessness. On that first day, I ran down the hill and into the road. Few cars ever came along it, and had the good sense to stop running before I reached the store. I was liked, and what a difference it made. I was respected, not as Mrs. Henderson's grandchild or Bailey's sister, but for just being Marguerite Johnson. Childhood logic never asks to be proved. All conclusions are absolute. I didn't question why Mrs. Flowers had singled me out for attention, nor did it occur to me that Mama might have asked her to give me a little talking to. All I cared about was that she had made tea cookies for me and read to me from her favorite book. It was enough to prove that she liked me. Hope you enjoyed this installment of Just Listen. Check the circular for re-airings of this program and new ones. Hey, Jerry, that's it for today. I'm going to get the signs and return the mic. Thanks for helping.